Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Under Construction. This is episode number 48, I think. And I am here on one of the more southwesterly reaches of the most southwesterly reach of the Volga Mountains Railroad as it stands in our route so far. And we're going to be adding more to that today, probably, because that's really the most enticing project with this whole thing right now. It's the one that most says, hey, finish me, get me done. Because it's the standout right now. It's the thing that's really interesting. So, that said, yeah, we're going to do some work on this. How does this look? That actually doesn't look half bad. I'll have to add a culvert under there. But, all things considered, not bad at all. So, anyway, I'd like to start off this episode by saying I apologize for the gap in episodes of Under Construction. The reason for that was a number of things, partially because I was graduating, which I know, unforgivable, but I'm sorry, you're going to have to let it go this time. And the other part was because last week I was sick. So I really didn't have a voice to actually make Under Construction as much as I would have liked to. And I didn't really have the mind to do it either. I was sort of a zombie, just in bed, not doing very much. So it has been pretty much, it's been 3 weeks, I believe, since we had an actual Under Construction episode, because previous to that, we had a Zombie Train episode. Oh, and yeah, and thus no Under Construction. So I apologize for the delays and for the gap, but I'd like to say that I have been bamboozled. First of all, because what happened was, I went and I looked through the comment, singular this time, and I saw a thing that I should download according to this commenter, who I will name later. And I went to download it, and I sat through the download sequence. It took a little while, because of course I don't have a first class ticket. It took a little while, but I just sat here and fiddled about on my phone. I didn't want to start the video with something downloading in the background, because then it would inevitably go to install and mess the recording up. So I decided not to do that. I decided to play it safe and wait a few minutes. Thing got downloaded, I already had a new version of it. So it was worthless for me to sit and wait all that time. Turns out, it was already in my game. And so I would assume, if I look it up, this one is it. And I already have that, and the reason I already have that, actually, and this one too, is that it was part of the Iron Horseman Railroad Narrow Gauge division that Weibold made ages and ages ago, which sorry, still getting over this a little bit. Full disclosure on the IHR Narrow Gauge, it's not originally IHR Narrow Gauge. It is the Copper Mesa and Timber Peak, I believe, was the name of it, and instead of making a new route for the series, he just gave us that one. So, because he was in charge of making the narrow gauge, of course, as you might assume. So anyway, I need to make a new base height back here, because if not, I'm just gonna spend the whole time building this area up. I feel like I should block this area off as well, and then fill in this and build the base height in there. Or at the very least, fill in this. Yeah, no, I gotta fill this in. Okay. Because base height is probably gonna stay more or less the same right now. This is 47. It can stay at 47 for the time being. But, yes, I will get to the singular and quite lengthy comment. Now, remember, anybody that's listening to this episode that isn't Icer the Blue Lion, or Icer, you can comment, and I will read it on the air, and I will respond on the air. It's really the best way to get me to say something about something, because I have a direct obligation to read those comments and say something on the air. It's really just a never-ending Q&A, but the added benefit is if you say something about an area of the route, I will be compelled to go over there and work on it. So if you say, hey, I wanna see this, or I want you to go back and work on this, or some such thing, then I am, like I said, compelled to go and do that. So I will gladly, because that means at that moment I'm thinking about it, and not only that, I'm getting input on it. So, obviously if it's an area we've already done and you say, hey, I want you to go work in the commercial district of Olive, I'll go and do what? I'll go over there and I'll sort of scratch my head and say, okay, well, I guess I could add some junk to the junkyard. But, unless you say something specific like, I really think you should add crosswalks to this crossing in downtown Olive, or, I think you should find a place to add this building because in the 1950s these kinds of buildings were really prevalent and you don't have one, etc., etc. That kind of thing. But again, if you throw something random at me without a lot of justification, I will go back and I'll look and I'll see if there's something that can be done. Because I'm all about appeasing the commenter. The commenter's always right, they say. Alright, so now that we've got this flattened out, I'm going to try to build up those hills over to my right there. Mostly the ones along the river here, and I do want to encroach on the blue line a little bit, because I want the height of the river to come up a little bit so we don't start making any really big lakes by accident. That's kind of important. That I want to avoid, because I do. Which, in this case, I think we've already started to raise it, and I just didn't finish by working on this south side of the river as opposed to the east side of the river. Which, and as well, it wouldn't be unheard of to have just a little lake in the middle of the river. But, there's got to be some justification for it, probably of falls or something. So there are two areas that need a new base height. This is one of them on this side of the river. The other one we just worked on, like I said, on the other side of the river. Which, in a way, it includes the river too. So that'd be a third place. Because that's really the area where there are going to be major changes. But if we get it up to here, which this is 63, so not bad. And then we build out this here, although this is another one where I could probably do to box this off and build some hills over here and put in a new base height to build some hills over here. That might do me some good. So I'm going to do that as well. So let's go this way. This line, I think, is it. More or less. You don't need to be exactly centered. It wouldn't be the end of the world if we missed just a bit. But, such is life. So yeah, I'll fill this in, and we'll get ready to put a new base height on here. Which, this is going to become either, this is either going to be the base height, or it's going to be, higher than that. Effectively, what I only need to do is build just a ring around the edge here, and then build a new base height in from that edge. But we've got this here, which needs to be built up. So actually what I'm doing is kind of superfluous. It's not really necessary because we're going to pave over it with a higher base height, probably, at least some of it, you would think. Although, it doesn't necessarily matter, really, I guess. No, we are going to pave over at least most of it. I would think, I would assume, I would guess. Just based on my own tendencies and based on what I have planned internally for this area. The other thing we can do is we could start laying down buildings in atoms. But I'm still not entirely confident. Again, it's going to be kind of an artsy town and like the gateway to the Volga Mountains. Maybe it'll be the head of some major trail. That's sort of what I was scheming before, I think. Sort of like the Appalachian Trail and the communities along that route. Not that that's as prominent, I think. I don't believe that the Appalachian Trail has that much sway over any major communities, or over any communities, at all, really. It's small and remote enough that I feel like the amount of people that hike the Appalachian Trail are seldom those who are there to be bombastic and do it for the meme, do it for the tourism aspect, where they're going in there to spend a bunch of money. They're doing it because they can. And I would wager if you're on the Appalachian Trail, you're maybe not necessarily out to spend a lot of money anyway. That is my assumption, though. I feel like, but that's coming from me, who figures, okay, if you're going to do the Appalachian Trail, it takes months to hike the Appalachian Trail. You're probably not, you're probably not. You're not going to be working during that time, so you probably have a limited savings to draw from. Unless you're a kid who's, getting money from parents, or you're somebody who's got, very good bonds and stocks. Stocks with dividends that are putting out at a very frequent and regular basis, which at that point probably means that you've saved a bunch of money anyway, and you're not really in the category that I'm thinking. Again, I don't know the demographics of folks who hike the Appalachian Trail. If I were to know that, this discussion would be a lot more informed. Sometimes you gotta take a step back and realize when you're not having an informed discussion. I'd like to think I'm a good debater, but I oftentimes will back off and effectively give up a debate because I'm facing, if you're facing someone who, doesn't have all the information but thinks they have all the information, it's going to be a lot harder if you are someone who won't say anything unless you know you have all the information. Saying, oh, hold on, let me Google this, let me pull up articles and see if it supports my point or not. That's something that's probably not going to keep a debate moving. You want to be prepared before you go into a debate and not be preparing during the debate, which, as so happens with debates that you encounter in the real life, political discussions with your friends or whatever, it's not something you necessarily explicitly prepare for. I don't go around seeking out articles that I can then throw at, people and be like, this is why my point is valid. See, look at them. Look at these articles. Look at these numbers. Look at these facts and figures. If I can remember something, I can remember something, but even then, it's like, okay, do I remember that correctly, and is it from a reputable source, which I can't check right now because I don't have the sources on me. So, sometimes there's just no winning with that. The other thing that's kind of important to do with this is to not have too many jagged edges to deal with. Although I can even those out with a plateau tool if I do it right, but that's extra time. But before I create a base height, I need to create edges, at least edges. All of the sculpted edges need to be up to the point where the base height will reach them and it won't be a drop-off. So this is a sculpted edge, but over there is not a sculpted edge, so it does not matter if we create a nice drop-off, as we have been doing. One of the other advantages of stepping away from under construction for 3 weeks, other than a increased vigor to get stuff done, I really just jumped into this. I had no qualms about, alright, we're going to go build more of the VMR now. Other than that, it's sort of, it gives me the opportunity to forget some of the songs that are in this playlist. And yeah, now I'm thinking about the playlist. But yeah, it crosses my mind that I hear pretty much the same group of songs every week. And I assume that's because the people that actually control the music bot, which can be anyone, but it isn't me because I'm busy making this episode every time that I'm listening to it. The people that actually control the music bot have a select group of songs that they enjoy. And don't get me wrong, I don't think they're bad songs. But it's sort of like listening to the radio, where you come on and you hear the same group of songs pretty much all the time. And so it's nice to come back after 3 weeks and maybe the folks have, sort of moved on a little bit, maybe changed the repertoire, maybe the bot itself has other pieces of music that it can display now, that I can play. So, you know, like this one, I don't remember this one. And maybe whether that be because it's been 3 weeks, or whether that be because it is a new song, or a newly popular song that I just, you know, that was not available to me for listenage last time I was making this. Also, last time I'm not sure if we had radio problems, I can't recall. I don't think we did, though. I think last episode everything went fine. Speaking of which, I haven't had a discussion topic. And I say speaking of which because it's, oh, what's that? I say speaking of which because, it sort of goes hand in hand that when I have a discussion topic, I turn the radio off. Because I don't need the music interfering in a talk. The reason I have the music is so that if I go quiet, so that if I suddenly run out of things to say and my mind goes blank, which happens on a not infrequent basis, especially when I'm tired, which I will talk about shortly, then you guys have something to listen to still. It's not just dead silence, because honestly, that is kind of unnerving. I've gone back and watched my own videos, and there's sort of a, you know, there's a 3-second rule, and I push that line all the time because I'm bad at it. But there's a 3-second rule where it's, if you've got more than 3 seconds of dead air, there's a problem. And naturally we ignore that all the time on the Terminus. But that's a show where, you know, not all of us have done sort of hosting or streaming or recording for a number of years in a row, at least not to this capacity. And, you know, we don't really all know what to do. And I certainly don't all know what to do. I don't know how necessarily to prompt people properly and to keep the flow moving. But I have talked about with a couple of, not just the co-host, but the guests as well. When I get a particularly good guest that I like, and that knows how to handle the show well, I usually will point out that they did a good job in the post-show. Or not the post-show, but after the show. And the reason I'll do that is because it's important for me, to assemble sort of a mental shortlist in case I lose in case I have to drop a co-host again. Unfortunately, like what happened with TJ, where he just wasn't around enough, and I decided that for the betterment of the show, we'd have to move to something else. Now that I have a job, again, which I will talk about shortly, now that I have a job, and I have a consistent schedule, I'm going to try to put the Terminus on a more consistent schedule, because, you know, despite what we talk about on the podcast, despite all of the saying that, oh, you know, this is always done on Saturday, we're never late. Surprise, it's done late a lot. Usually Monday nights, if not a Sunday night, you know, a Monday night or a Tuesday night even, that's the latest I'll let it go. If it gets to Tuesday night, I'll push it off until the next week, which is why we've had some gaps of 3 weeks with podcasts lately. Because I instituted that rule, and also because my semesters had late Tuesdays, so basically, late Mondays and Tuesdays, my last semester did. And, so it came down to, if we miss it on the weekend, which was common, because, you know, people like Jader, who are in school, well, Jader in particular is a good example, because he's the only one on the podcast that was in high school. But if Jader can't make it because because his school makes it so that he has to work on the weekends. Basically, it wasn't that school made him not have time, it was that, of course, work wouldn't make him not have time, and he doesn't have time for work during the week because he's in school. Which would mean he's available for a Tuesday or Monday night show, but wouldn't be necessarily up for it because you've got school the next day. Whereas I would be okay with a Tuesday or Monday night show because I wouldn't have class until... God damn it, that looks good, now I've ruined it. Until, you know, later the next day. Tuesday in particular, like I said, 6 o'clock p.m. Plenty of time in there to, to get all my sleep in that I miss for having, you know, from having a late podcast. And I've lost my train of thought again. But, you know, all of those things combined, his schedule, my schedule, Weibold's schedule with the museum, all sort of came together and made the perfect storm of, well, we can't do it this night, we can't do it this night. And, you know, once the weekend passed, like I said, it would be into the weekdays, and the fact that I had to push the podcast so late would make it so that Jader would not really be able to stay on for the whole thing, or even, be on for it at all. We would search for a replacement Jader, but I won't run the podcast with fewer than 2 of my normal co-hosts. And there's not really an exact reason for that, it's just that I like to try and keep the show lineup consistent. In the back of my head, sometimes I think about, well, what if I just had a sort of rolling lineup of, well, whoever can be on, 3 people from a select group. But it's bad enough getting 1 person out of the guest list for a podcast, so I decided that that's not worth it anyway. It's much better to have a consistent rolling cast who pretty much know what they're doing, or, well, at the very least, know how the show flows and everything that goes on, because we have some people, like Pester, for example, who was on recently, who the last time he'd been on was quite some time ago. And at that point in time, we ran things a little bit differently. Sorry, I needed some water. We have gone through a total of 3 documents. Oh crap, I'm getting, what is doing that again? I've got the little lawnmower going in the background again. I'm not sure if that'll stand out on the video, but I saw it in the Audacity recording, just out of the corner of my eye. So I'll have to look into that again. Again, I'm pretty sure it's the refresh rate on this monitor, because I've never had that problem with the other monitor. So, anyway, back to what I was talking about. We have gone through a total of 3 different documents for the Terminus, plus all the ancillary documents. We have a document. We have a document where we keep all the questions, like the ones that we have ideas for. And we have a document where we have a bunch of cargoes documents. We have a document that we did not make that is for Locomotive Versus. That's all the past Locomotive Versus, although it hasn't been updated in a couple of weeks. I noticed that a couple days ago when I went back to relish in the different titles that we've had for the podcast, because the titles of the podcast I think are always the best. Out of everything on my channel, they are the funniest, hands down. Anyway, yeah. So we moved from, I think, document version 2 to document version 3 in the time that, somewhere between Pester coming in, and so we had to reintroduce him to the document once again. Of course, getting somebody up to speed who's never been on before is another thing, but the fact of the matter is most of the people in the guest list watch the podcast at least semi-regularly, so they know the organization of things. It's fun to sort of trip somebody up, though, when they've come on to a new document and they expect the old document. Alright, so we're filling this area in still. There's a problem. And I just sort of thought of it as I was filling this in, and maybe I should have done things differently, but I'm not sure we have the opportunity to change that at this point. Because there's no other way out of over here. And what I'm talking about is, you can probably see the edge of the tile from over there. I'm going to be careful with it so I don't raise the edge of the tile as much, but let me see by going down here. Yeah, that's no good. That should not be like that. That is bad. So the solution is to either raise this, which, that's the easy solution. Or lower this, which that's the harder solution because it's a little bit more of a pain. So we're going to raise this a little bit, which is good because I didn't put anything on it yet. No trees or anything to get in the way. Not that they would, because I have a handy trees layer now, or sub-layer. I guess you could probably get away with calling it a sub-layer, because there are only 2 main layers, the route layer and the other layer. The one that I don't use. That'd be surveyor layer, I think. Or no, it's session. It's session layer. It's session layer. Surveyor layer. I knew it wasn't that as soon as it came out of my mouth because it sounded too good. N3V, if you use that in the future, you owe me royalties. Surveyor layer. And I was half tempted to say, well, I wonder if that still rhymes in Australian. Of course it does, mate. And that's one of the accents that I do not feel confident doing. Although, that said, I don't feel confident doing most of the accents that I do. I just do them. Let's see, we're 25 minutes in and I've done bugger all. There, we can't see it now. Good. Goody good. What else I'll do is I'll actually lower this so that water from here would have a hypothetical outlet down this way. Or ish. You know, now I have a valley here and it looks marginally better. Which this default sensitivity setting is actually pretty good for what I'm trying to do. Any of you have those mouse pads with the wrist like support? Because they gave me one at work and I'm tempted to bring in my own. Okay, so actually, now that I said work, I might as well talk about it because I should and just clear everything up and, you know, sort of say what needs to be said about that. Not that there's much. But I recently, and by recently I mean 3 days ago as of this recording, probably 4 as of this posting, started a job at a company called WSP USA, also known as WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff, which is notable in the railroading world for a number of things, including the original 1904 subway underneath Manhattan in New York City. So that's, you know, there's your foam out of the way. We made that. We made a whole bunch of other things, including in the same neighborhood, literally, the 2nd Avenue subway. We are working on portions of that. So, again, foam out of the way. If you want to know more, feel free to ask me, or just look them up, because the Wikipedia page told me plenty when I was figuring out, oh, who the hell are these people? But it's a 36,000 person global engineering firm, which we do all sorts of things, but mostly civil engineering stuff, or, you know, we're a civil engineering firm, but we do dabble. That said, I'm in the traffic division, so I'm going to be doing things like signals, you know, traffic signals, traffic lanes, detours, new roads, basically everything that has to do with roads and cars on them, I'm going to have to deal with, which, you know, you might think is a little bit far from my passion, which is railroads. But A, we do have a railroads department in-house, and if the time ever comes that I could work with them, I gladly would. And 2, or B, I don't know if I said A or 1, you know, they say don't do your hobby for a living, and now I wouldn't be like model railroading for a living at WSP, but there is a point there. You know, I don't want to become too invested in the railroad side of things, you know, in my work life, that I don't want to hear about it in my home life. So this is my what you would call it. This is my railroad therapy right here. We're building mountains, but it's railroad therapy. We'll call it that. And at work I get to play with cars and roads, stuff like that. I get to design towns like Olive. Not quite. Urban planning, you know, is a little bit out of our depth because we wouldn't be designing a whole town from the ground up. But I get to do that on here. So it's good enough for me. Lately, you know, this past few days I've just been getting situated. I've just been doing a lot of reading. Not only company stuff, but just general stuff to become more acquainted with what I will be working with for the next who knows how many years. This position entails a commute, which is significant. You'll probably hear me talk about it in the Terminus fan chat if you're in that from time to time, which, if you're not in that, can be accessed through the Terminus fan chat link in the in any of the more recent cargoes for the Terminus podcast. It's a Skype group, and there's, you know, 40-some people in there or so, 30-some people. which are, pretty much all Terminus fans, and if they aren't Terminus fans, they are probably members or have been guests or, that sort of thing. So, it's a mix. And we've got a couple of people in there who talk a lot, we've got a bunch of people who talk a little, and you've got myself who talks whenever there are really people around, and, that is the best way, probably, the best way to actually engage with me, I would think, because when there is a discussion going on, I'm pretty much obligated to jump in, especially if it's something that I feel like I have a stake in, or it's something about one of my shows, or, that sort of thing. Then I'm, like I said, pretty much obligated to jump in, and I can do so almost at any time of the day, unless I'm really busy at work. But, like I said, yeah. Thinky. Oh, commute, yeah. So, I have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning these days. Which, oof, yeah, I know. It's got its ups and its downs, goods and bads for getting up at 6 o'clock. Get up at 6 o'clock, I've got 20 minutes, then I get on a bike and ride for 20 minutes. And that 20 minutes, that second 20 minutes, gets me to a train station. Where then, I get on an MBTA commuter rail train. And then, whoops, that's the wrong way. And then I sit in a chair for about an hour and 20 minutes. And usually, during that period of time, I will be writing scripts for the Iron Horsemen. So, all is not lost. As I've talked about, all is not lost with the Iron Horsemen. We are doing work. It's just slow and painstaking. Because the fact of the matter is, we're all busy people. It's become summer now, but because I'm the ringleader of the Tormentors for that group, so to speak, if I am busy, nothing gets done. And I would like that to not be the case, but that's not really feasible. As I have seen in the past, unfortunately. But, I have weekends off all the time, like I've said on previous things. Sunday is going to become Horseman Day as best as I can, barring family events or other things that I have to attend or go to or what have you. Some site visits for work are going to be on the weekends, so, I'll have to forego some things, push a podcast, push a Sunday driving, which Sunday driving is going to come back. Just stating that. I was saying something. Which means that progress, while it will be slow, it will exist, and it has existed. But the fact of the matter is, when the script was written for To Rule the World, which is what we're waiting on, really, it was positioned as a very ambitious project. And, the script is almost 80 pages long, and I've gone through and I've pruned it a little bit as we've worked. But the fact of the matter is, the real holdup is not voice lines or anything, although I know there are some later scenes that we're going to have to go and poke people for, because the thing is so long that I figured we'd just get lines sequentially, and it's been so long that, it's just, some of the lines might have been misplaced, and I don't know what lines ever really got to me in the first place. I took them and I categorized them, but I never went through them and sorted them and put them together in some cases. Or in most cases, really, in more than half the scenes. But I have people that do a fairly good job, like Milky and TBA, of putting together master audio files. And as well, I have people that do a fairly good job of putting together scenes, like TJ, and TBA has done that as well in the past. And he's done a decent job, too. Jader has done that as well. And Argilies, I think, but it's been a long time. Jader, you'll know which scenes are his because he always has a square monitor. He still hasn't upgraded to a 16:9, so if there's a scene of his dropped in the middle of a otherwise normal episode, it's the one scene that's in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is obnoxious, but there's not much we can do about it. And frankly, to have a scene that is 14:3, or sorry, 14:3, that'd be a weird one. To have a scene that's 4:3 in a 16:9 is not the end of the world. It doesn't look great, but it doesn't look terrible. And it's more important to us, or it was in that point to stay on schedule. But, you know, if he's the only person that can effectively do that work at that point in time, it's more important to me to get the work done and move on, because, you know, we've been sitting on To Rule the World for a very long time. The thing with To Rule the World, like I was saying, is... I really should have gotten to the comment, because this was mentioned, is the fact that it has fairly hefty Garry's Mod parts. And Garry's Mod is not something that I am fluent in, really. It's not something that I'm particularly good at. And this is going to be our max height, I think, for a while. Oh, crap. And I've forgotten yet again. And I can't do that by myself, and like I said, I was not good at it. I don't even have a lot of the stuff. I'm not in tune with the guys who do Garry's Mod, really. I was never part of that group. I've just logged on a couple of times and built a couple of goofy things, you know. Every once in a long while, you can catch me on one of the Gmod servers riding around what I call the Pimp Mobile, which was something that is 100% jerry-rigged by me. It's just made of a couple of props and a thruster, which I know how much of a sin using a thruster is on a Garry's Mod train build server, but I really can't be bothered to learn the better alternatives because I'm never going to use them. I never will. I'm never going to set aside that time, and I hesitate to say never. You know, there may be a point in the future where Gmod really grabs me and suddenly I'm neck-deep in building locomotives, but at this point in time, I can't see it happening. I've sat on the game for a long while, and I just have a couple of things, you know, which, you know, one of the things that I'm fairly proud of because it was a little bit forward-thinking of me when I didn't know how to do anything, and I've been commended for it. You know, I was briefly at the time, and, you know, furthermore being told that, you know, that was an innovative way of doing that. We have actual ways of doing that, but, you know, whatever. Enough tooting my own horn. Just another sip of water. Need to keep my voice from going away. It's very useful to have one at work. Okay, thoughts, brain, go. Let's see, what's the lowest height on this edge here? Let's see, is there any one that's over, or that's under 100? Because if not, it's just at the far back end there. Oh, nope, not even close. So we could probably get away with 100, which is right about here, or whatever this is. 117, maybe a little bit lower. 106. 108 is good. Let me, before I fill this in, let me get to the comments so I can start talking about it. Icer the Blue Lion, and I will say the full username when I'm reading out the comment, although he does say at the end you can just call me Icer. But I'll get to that. FYI, it's a lot to read, good luck. A, already screwed it up because I said rot to read. B, I was gonna say it's okay, I'm good at reading, but apparently I'm not. So he said it's a lot to, and I almost screwed it up. Again, I almost said it's a lot to lead. It's a lot to read, good luck. Well, let me just fill in a little more of this, and then I'll try my luck, Icer. Okay. Eastern Valley Railroad. Okay, that's the one that he was talking about last time. It's been a while, sorry. Eastern Valley Railroad is based on and around the East Coast and around the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. Plus, there will be A and Seaport too, but need to figure out how and where to put that. Well, it depends on if you're doing a directly sort of proto-lanced route with real terrain. Are you going to do a dem for it? Because I know people who can get dems. I personally can't. I don't have Trains Dem. Which Trains Dem is like $30, but if you're going to make a lot of routes, it's worth the $30. If not, go find somebody who has Trains Dem and ask them for it. Which, like I said, I know 2 or 3 people at least. I know one. Plus, you know, a couple more that I'm pretty sure have it, that could get you pretty much anything. You know, I know at least 2. Milky and Kevon both have it. But, And additionally, they're both in the Terminus guest list, so if you... Or not guest list. Well, they are both in the guest list, but the guest list is not the place for chatter. The guest list is for news for the Terminus. And they're in the fan chat, so if you really were to need that, if you were to want that, you could probably get it from them if you hopped in and asked nicely. But yeah, I wouldn't really have a way to hand that file off. They'd just have to pass it to you via your method of choice, either directly through Skype or through, like, a big file transfer like WeTransfer if it's big. I don't know how big DEMs are. Obviously, it would depend on the size of ground. DEM, for record, is it's a U.S. Geological Survey topographic map that you turn into a trains map, just directly. You get, sometimes the roads and the tracks, you get a top-down view, I think, and you get all the terrain, which the terrain is the important part. So, it depends on where you want to go with this. Let me continue with the write-up, and then I will continue giving my thoughts and opinions. This road will connect with two Class 1s, NS and CSXT, but mostly just NS, so this route will have logging and coal mines too. Okay, cool. So CSX, well, you mentioned, I mean, you know your general area, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So the only options for seaports there are going to be right on the eastern seaboard, of course, on the bay, or directly on the Atlantic Ocean, depending how far down in Virginia you want to go. You don't want to have to cross into New Jersey because it's New Jersey. Also because you said, well, because you didn't say New Jersey. But, alright, let me continue reading. It has steam era with diesel era too, so that gives a sort of time period to go by. Well, it's not really a time period unless you're talking transition era, but I glanced ahead and it says Tier 4s. So, I mean, it's your fictional world. You can do whatever the hell you want. I have talked about in the past what I think makes a good route, and one of the most important things for me is justification. So if you can justify why there would be steam and diesel on a route, by all means, Godspeed. The other thing, though, it only takes a good imagination to come up with justification. Maybe a little bit of historical looking, but again, it depends on how historical you want to be. This is Tolbrit. It has 3 fictional railroads. It exists on a fictional portion of what's presumably the east coast of the United States, yet the coastline is on the west. It takes terrain from the east coast and the Appalachian Mountains, and places the ocean on the opposite side, and takes inspiration from east coast roads and a western road, the DRGW, and a number of other things. It's sort of a mishmash of things. I'm trying to focus in an era where you would be seeing steam and diesel power and build the power around that era. But if I can go so far as to literally design a world that just sort of conforms to the standards and things that we as reasonable people expect out of a route, then that's fine. I do like to do routes that are, that are realistic, but not real. Routes that may have a fragment of truth to them, maybe in their location, maybe in their inspiration, and then build from that. Tolbrand is one of the few that I literally, well, no, not one of the few, but it's one of the more recent ones that I've done from legitimately the ground up. It doesn't have a place, and all of the towns are fictitious. Even the ones that it connects to off-map, and the resources and everything like that. Everything's fictitious. The only thing that's realistic is the era. So, like I said, you can do whatever you want. I want to plug for a second a railroad that I came up with a while ago, which was called the Eustis and Leeds. And this is not one that I touted on the show. It's not one that I ever started working on. It wasn't for me. It was for TJ. And I don't believe he really got very far in it either because, like many of us, he starts projects and doesn't finish them. Especially in trains. It was supposed to be a more bite-sized project, but he got busy, as we all do, and when a project like that languishes for so long, you lose the ability to really pick it up again. And I understand that. This is the kind of thing where it's been 3 weeks since I've been here. Yeah, I'm a little bit reinvigorated. At the same time, I was like, oh, I gotta go back to Tolbryn now. I had, 3 weeks off of working on it. And now it's time to, now that pogo stick bounces again, crazy pogo stick bounces again, and we are here on Tolbryn building mountains. As we will be for many years to come. And valleys. Valleys too, don't forget about them. Okay. There be more Steam era thou, cause I love Steam trains, and I wish there was more need for Steam locos too. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Justification. Now, the fact that you love them is not a justification. But if you can figure out why there would be a need for more steam locomotives, then you're golden. Then you're totally golden. Maybe in your fictional world there's an oil embargo, and coal is just that much more readily available. And so instead of converting diesel engines to burn, instead of making sort of hybrid engines that could burn coal or coal dust or something of that sort that were still internal combustion, they stuck with external combustion steam engines, the tried and true. There's just one thought, an oil embargo or an oil crisis. But then, any of the diesel I'll have are Alco, EMDs, and Baldwins. Awesome. Oh, never mind. Oh, sorry. Completely. I glanced forward and saw Tier 4, and I thought you were going to make justification for having diesels in the modern era. Okay, backpedal on everything I said, except for the fact that, yeah, it's important to have justification for everything. I think that it would still be possible to do if you want to, but I probably should have read the whole thing. I guess I am bad at reading. I glanced it over, and I sort of gauged my responses based on that. No Tier 4 or GE locos. Well, you could have a GE 44 tonner, something like that. GE has been around for a very long time, like a very long time. The very fledgling early beginning of diesels, to the point where they have some of the most well-known and effective early diesels, like the 44 tonner and the 80 tonner, and stuff like that. But if you're throwing Baldwins in the mix, then yeah, you're going with first-gen diesels. Still, you would have GE switchers, but yeah, no more modern, no like U-Series or anything like that. Unless you want to. Then you can do whatever you want, like I've said. Plug the Eustis and Leeds, by the way. I should talk about that because I started leading you guys on and I didn't take it anywhere. Eustis and Leeds is a railroad that was designed based on a hypothetical short line in Maine, which at the time of its existence connected the Grand Trunk to the south, the Maine Central to the north, in a location that I do not remember. But it exists, I swear, it does in fact exist. I planned it out, and I even renamed some of the towns to fit towns that are in that area. So, Eustis, Maine, however, is not in the area that the Eustis and Leeds is. Leeds is, however, I think. It's between Lisbon and Leeds, I think, if I recall correctly. So you can look up that area if you want and get a feel for everything that's going on over there. But the area, the terrain itself was completely prototypical. It's only the town names and railroad names that I actually took. Or no, not prototypical. It's completely freelance. Sorry, derp. It's just, well, it's proto-lanced, I would suppose. It's designed after Maine area. It's not just an area that I made up. Like, some other places. The older looking locos have more character than what the locomotives have today. Word. So I think having narrow gauge to be 3 foot for the logging would be really cool too, but like you said, that you need to figure out how you want it to play out when using 3 foot gauge track for logging. Right now I'm working on a 7x7 grid of an industrial park. Wow, that's pretty big. And the main yard for the EVRR will be about 25 to 30 miles away from this industrial park I'm working on now. Cool. Yeah, industrial parks are fun. You can really draw some inspiration. I don't know where you're from exactly. You may have said so in an earlier comment, or at least alluded to, but I'm going to assume you're from the Eastern Seaboard because that's where you're building a route. Looking at old New England mills in particular is really, really interesting to give inspiration for what a older style industrial complex really is like and really feels like. It's very, it's very grimy. Modern day industrial complexes are, a lot of steel sheeted buildings and aluminum, whereas older industrial complexes are more brick and wood and stone buildings. And you can look at things, that maybe don't even necessarily have such a large railroad presence, but like Royal Mills, for example, or Salesville and the Sales Bleachery, which I'm going to be basing the Mason Valley Bleachery off of, and I've talked about before. That's a good idea of what you can do with part of an industrial park. If you're going a 7x7 grid, that's 3.5 miles by 3.5 miles. That's really big. That's a good size. You can get a lot in there. And so, then you're going to be wondering, okay, what industries do I fit in here? If you've got lumber and if you've got coal. Now, coal doesn't do as much unless you want to build a steel mill, because it just drops off at a power plant, and that's kind of it. But with lumber, you can do all sorts of things. You can do all kinds of manufacturing. And manufacturing is where all the fun stuff comes in. Because manufacturing, you can have 100 different inputs and outputs for, a set of industries. So many things use wood in their construction. Think about just the amount of sawmills you could cram in. You might even have a pair of competing sawmills in the same industrial park that create beams and boards and planks and stuff like that. Something might produce a whole lot of 2x4s, but another place might produce plywood, with wood chips. You can have a paper mill in there. Paper mills are really complicated, actually. You should see, look up in Maine at examples of paper mills, including Rumford has an extensive one. Although I'm not sure if the track work there is as extensive as it used to be, but when I drove by it not too long ago, a lot of stuff going on. It's, those are the kind of things you can do with wood. Look at all the things that wood and wood byproducts are used for. And then also think about how the factories themselves are getting power. If the industrial park, if you're in the transition era, the industrial park may have, it may have water wheels depending on the age and of some of the buildings. So the very early structures may still be water powered if they still exist, though mills and mill complexes had a tendency to burn down and then would be rebuilt from scratch. But the fuel for the mills now, a lot of the mills are probably then going to be coal powered. There's going to be at least one steam plant on the premises, more than likely, where you can drop off plenty of coal, and that would either pipe to all the other buildings, which would run engines in those buildings, probably via tunnels, steam tunnels, not unheard of, and that would also be used to heat the buildings if you're in a colder climate. But you're in Virginia, so you don't need that as much. Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, southern Pennsylvania, I would assume. I can brainstorm on these routes all day. I really can. Another book for mills, or not another book, but another resource, which is a book for mills, is David Macaulay's Mill. Now, if you don't know David Macaulay and you have a penchant and a passion for engineering of really any type, I would look it up immediately. These are books that are interesting enough that an older audience at least a young adult audience, if not just an older audience in general, an adult audience, etc., can read them, and they are very well illustrated at the same time, so a younger audience can wrap their head around them just the same. In fact, I have had many of them, I think I have all of them, I would hope, since I was much younger, and it's a blast. I go back and reread those books all the time, especially Mill. Mill is one of my favorites. In no small... Maybe it's a little bit of nepotism in there, a little bit of bias, because it is set in Rhode Island. But it will give you an idea, maybe not for how the railroads interface, but it will give you an idea for how mill complexes grow. And if you can understand that, then you will have a much easier time designing and building your industrial park. Because you can figure, okay, what came after what? And what would be the earliest thing? Track would not be bending around fairly new buildings, but track would be bending around very old buildings, or, in some cases, the sites of very old buildings that have since been knocked down. A great example of this, not for a mill complex, but just in general, is if you go look at Rutland, Vermont, which you'll notice where the station is, and you'll notice that the track just south of the station sort of does this weird bend around a large, a shopping center, I think it is. The reason is that was the back track to the entire yard and shops complex for the Rutland Railroad. And obviously the Rutland Railroad is not so big anymore. In fact, it's so small it doesn't exist. But the track perseveres and is used by Amtrak's, not Adirondack, it's used by the Vermonter. And that, that's the only track left in that area, really. There's a Y nearby, and there are, I think, a couple of sidings, but that entire complex has disappeared. However, the basic shape of the complex can still be seen in the fact that this track, which you wouldn't relocate unless you absolutely had to, bends around these buildings, which have since filled in the complex, or the general area and shape of said complex. Okay, where was I? Yeah, industrial park. Let me go back to this. Yeah, no, and like I was saying before, you can 100% get away with 3-foot gauge for logging. In fact, no matter what you're doing, 3-foot gauge in trains is a lot more versatile. And I know I said this last time, but it's a lot more versatile. You can do a lot more with it. There's a lot more stuff on the download station. There's a lot more stuff off the download station. It is useful. And 2-foot gauge, unless you are moving coal in very small amounts or logs, it is not that useful. To the point where the 2-foot gauge in the Iron Horseman just moves logs and also moves passengers, because if you've got passenger cars, you can do that. It's not that hard. Let me base height this area. No, I don't want to plateau it, I want to base height it. Yeah, I'll get back to that thought in a second once I've done with this area here. And I really need to be more careful on these edges, I keep gouging them. Which it's tough to tell sometimes with the way the grid is, but I could at least do to be a bit more careful. Or I could actually pay attention to when... No, don't like it. Not good, no good. I'll just gouge, I'll leave that as a cliff and I'll fix it later with the plateau tool. Okay. That as well, I need to even that out. I need to even it up, even it up, even it out. Alice Cooper. Is that Alice Cooper? Or is that Hart? I think it's Alice Cooper. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I listened to it the other day, I swear, I did. But I haven't listened to stuff that much because I don't have earbuds anymore, I broke them. Well, one of them died. One corner, one side of them died, and it's not worth listening to them in one ear. And I'm too frugal to actually go buy another pair of earbuds. So, anyway. That said, I'm miserable because of reasons that I've created. But, yeah, industrial parks are so much fun. And you can do other things, you know, you don't have to be tied down by just what you're bringing in with lumber and logs and stuff. You can have other things. You know, look at Olive. Olive is an okay example, because we've got things like steel coming in. And, you know, general goods, of course, which I wholeheartedly recommend doing general goods like I've done general goods, because general goods are too goddamn general. And you have to find some way to make them interesting. And some way where you can't just take general goods out of one industry and put them into an industry next door. Just because you can. I assure you that one singular industry is not producing anything that is general enough for general goods. There is no Walmart of factories. Each factory produces their own kind of thing. However, there may not be an individual commodity for that kind of thing, so it has to become quote-unquote general goods, which then you can mix with a whole bunch of other general goods types to produce, or you know, a whole bunch of other general goods to produce a different type of general goods, which you can actually consider to be general. And then you can distribute that. Voila! He's clean. Okay, we're gonna continue building up this mountain too. I'm not even laying track at this point. I'm just building a mountain. That's all I'm doing. You'd wonder that is it any wonder I'm not crazy? That's, oh god, what is that? That's Rush, isn't it? That's Too Much Time on My Hands by Rush. Yeah. I never quite understood that song. Just what they were going for. Is it any wonder I'm not, you know... Well, actually, no. No. Never mind. Not never mind as in I suddenly understood it, but my gripe is ill-founded. Because the is it any wonder I've got too much time on my hands is just, you know, it just fills in with that. Although, that said, having too much time on your hands is not really synonymous with the things that they talk about in the song. I am on a total sidetrack. I will get back to Icer's comment now. My plan is to have Phase 1 be done by Christmas, and maybe I'll let you give it a test run, so see how you like the route, and get your tips and view on this route. I will be pleased as punch to test drive your route come Christmas, which hopefully Christmas then falls around one of these route review days. If not, you can send it to me on the one before or the one after, depending. Which, like I've said, the best way to actually get in touch with me so that I can do your route is to come and find me on Skype. My username on there is bombs321, same as the channel. Right now, the picture is... well, it's Venom with googly eyes. But I sometimes will change it. It's been a while since I've changed it. I just don't feel like it at this point in time. I haven't bothered. I just can't be bothered. I actually can't be bothered because more recently they changed it so that I think you can only use like PNGs. And not all my stuff is in PNG, and I just haven't bothered to convert it all yet. But I have all sorts of stuff. I have, you know, a bunch of faces that I cycle through, and a whole ton of logos. One's from Rhode Island, one's from Massachusetts, and of course the standard railroad of the world, the Keystone, and the New York Central logo as well, because I am an inclusive individual. And the BNA logo, because they're not the real Central anyway. I love the BNA. I love the BNA for the wrong reasons. Alright, continue this. Also, I'm still trying to figure out a paint scheme for the Eastern Valley Railroad 2. So I'm not sure if you are any good with coming up with a color scheme for a railroad. Okay, I mean, when you say Eastern Valley Railroad, I think Lehigh Valley. But, I'm thinking about it, and I think it was Erie that had a big E and a diamond. So, like that, but on top of maybe a... so, like, I don't know. And there's got to be some maroon in there. It just feels like maroon is right for this railroad. Maybe I'm wrong, but you be the judge. Big E and a diamond on the side of a locomotive that has an upper and lower, almost halves that are painted the same color, probably maroon or black or gray, and then a stripe that runs through the middle of that, which maybe has a smaller stripe inside of it. I don't know. This is actually kind of complicated, but it's interesting. I at least think. And you can use the big E, but again, I'm pretty sure that's just Erie. But if you can figure out how to mix the Lehigh Valley in the Erie logo, which maybe I'm thinking Lackawanna. Yeah, Erie Lackawanna was a company. Erie and Lehigh Valley were not. I don't think they ever merged, unless they were both part of Conrail. Although I think one of them wasn't. Chris is going to come in the comments or not and correct me on this. I just don't know off the top of my head. This is one of those things, going back to the political discussions. I don't have all the evidence on me. I'm afraid to make an assertive statement one way or the other because it might be wrong. I don't know. I don't know enough about the anthracite roads, really, to say. Not off the top of my head, at least. The fact of the matter is, as much as I tout my knowledge of railroads, or as much as I sort of talk about it, and as much as I say things that would sort of indicate that I have a decent knowledge of railroads, I'm very much a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to railroads. Even the things in my area I'm not hugely familiar with. It's really just a factor of, oh, well, I heard this, and I know this, and I can probably extrapolate a couple things, and I can make a couple of things up, why not? Alright, this is a cool looking mountain, I guess. That's what we did for the first... Whoops, I almost downvoted Icer's comment. That's what we did for the first hour and 5 minutes. We built this hill. Just that one. Goodness gracious, it's going to take forever for us to get anywhere. But hey, pretty sweet looking hill. Alright, continuing on Icer's comment. I mean, I came up with a color scheme for 3 railroads. 4 if you count the, 4 if you count the trolley company, but I really didn't come up with anything for that. I just said, hey, it'll be grayscale for the most part if for maintenance away stuff, and other than that, I don't really have an interest in doing the colors because the lines are probably going to have different colors themselves. So, because it's a commuter service, it's, even with the Metropolitan Transit Authority, or no, even with the Metro North, who you'd think would have a consistent paint scheme, it's different per line. So, nowhere is safe, nobody is immune. Alright, what is this height? 63. Can I use this and just move up the... Oh my god! Talk about a gouge. Put a big gouge in the side of it. Oh, I'm using... not the highest. That's another one that... I always throw out these references where I'm never sure if people will get them. Because I feel like I'm very much in tune with the things that my dad cares about. And I feel like the people watching this video are not really of that generation. And that's, fine, but there's a not so subtle disconnect between the things that I feel like I'm expected to know, the dankest of the memes in the modern era, and the things that I actually do know that are, funny or entertaining to me that I can spout at random. Now, the amount of stuff that I pull from Hogan's Heroes on a daily basis is, is something else entirely. Which, that is a show that I will be surprised if more than a very minute handful of people in the audience of people that has ever viewed my channel has watched. Not because it was a bad show, but because it's from the 60s. It's because it's so old that the original episodes are in black and white. And maybe I get to wondering why I make these jokes at work, and the other folks, including the interns, are like, huh? Which, admittedly, hasn't happened yet. I make the jokes, there aren't too many people that are below me in the company, that's for sure. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure the supervisor would appreciate a Hogan's Heroes joke. I mean, you gotta wonder if my boss, Phil, watched Hogan's Heroes. I wouldn't be surprised if the guy did. It just takes filling in this cavity here, and then building up the edges and making sure they don't look bad like that does. Which now I'm using the up tool like a plateau tool. I need to stop that, because that's not going to solve anything. It's just going to make things look weirder, not better. Also, my foot is very asleep. It's very uncomfortable. Oh, I can't move my leg. That just makes it worse. That makes it worse. Whew. Okay. Back to Icer's comment. So for the IHR, why was Stallion down at the docks? Also, in the first ep for the IHR, how did Sally turn around? Like, I know it was editing got her to turn around to head back to town, but just something that made me wonder, that's all. Alright, I will go off of that. So, Stallion was an engine that, because in the Iron Horseman universe, engines have a lot more autonomy than they do in real life. Sometimes you get locomotives that are doing things that are maybe outside the scope of what they would usually be doing. Like, for example, in a recent script that I wrote, mentions a locomotive that has actually become a lawyer. Went to law school. Which, you know, is unusual in the Iron Horseman universe even, but not unheard of, because engines are just as smart as we are, in some cases, if not smarter. They're just kind of limited by mobility and a number of other things. But the engine in question works in Boston, so there's plenty of tracks for him to meander around to get from place to place. Much like Bell. Bell is from Boston originally, as one might surmise from the fact that he is a member of the Boston Boys. Anyway. Stallion is down by the docks because he wants to be, because he very much loves the water, he loves the seaside, and he learned very quickly after coming to the Iron Horseman way back when. Now, backstories to characters are lacking. I know, I'm filling this in now. This isn't how it should be done. It should have been done, or should be done, in an episode. Which, you know, I had it brought to my attention that the backstories of characters are not really very well explained, and it did occur to me, we're focusing more on things that are happening in the current, you know, and the moment in the Iron Horseman, and not really giving a lot of, oh, this person's from this place, this person's from this place, this person is here because of this reason. Now, Stallion, just to give the abridged version, is the first Mikado, was the first Mikado to come to the Iron Horseman Railroad, and this was in, I believe, 1923. Arrived at a very similar timing to Sandy and Rangeley. And 5 years before the Boston Boys. So for 4 years, approximately, if I'm remembering my dates right, Stallion was the most powerful engine on the Iron Horseman by a long shot. Because before that, I believe they had a couple of other engines that we really have never mentioned because they came and went in the very early days. But for the most part, they just had Mark and Hebert, who were the railroad's original two engines. And Hebert being slightly senior to Mark is worth mentioning. Now that said, yeah, he was originally the guy who did a lot of the heavy hauling stuff because he could pull more than either of the two other engines. And he was also on snowplow duty more often than not because of the same reason. He had higher tractive effort, he could do it more effectively. But once more power started coming in, he sort of relegated himself, or he asked to be relegated to trains that were coming to and leaving from the docks, which meant he spent more time down there, which meant he became more familiar with it, and as Davenport grew, he really sort of became the foremost expert on all the inner workings and everything that needs to be done down there. And yeah, he asked for help, because it's really not his place to be doing that kind of stuff, but he definitely didn't hate it. And so as time went on, because he was the most senior at the docks, he became the engine at the docks. And the original plan for him is to have him come up to Troy at the end of every day, bring whatever's left and go down in the morning, taking down whatever needs to be there, early in the day. However, because of the fact that the docks are very busy, he doesn't usually get to go back up to Troy. He usually just stays down there in sort of a makeshift engine shed. Now, that said, now that I've sort of established the quirks of the docks, there's a reverse loop. To answer your second question, if you back out of the station, you can back out and you can go around a reverse loop, which is sort of built off near where the there's a coaling tower there as well, I think, but it's near where the 3-foot gauge interfaces / used to interface, because the Davenport oil branch, or quote unquote, which is what it was known as, but it was the military branch, was shuttered, way back when, shortly after the war ended. Yes. Anyway, there is a reverse loop. That's how Sally turned around. It wasn't just the power of editing magic. As a matter of fact, when we were building the Iron Horseman and when we do scripts, I will almost always make sure to reference the route, or at least my knowledge of the route, to make sure that a move by a locomotive is possible. There are a couple of things in episodes that, usually involving Hank, where he's being mischievous, where it might not necessarily make sense that he can get from point A to point B so quickly, but in almost all cases, we do make sure that he can get from point A to point B. Period. And in fact, there was some contention in the writer's room for a time whether we should actually do that or not. And I was always very adamant that yes, we should absolutely do that. I'm, to suspend disbelief as much as possible, to make it a more believable world, and more importantly, just to make things realistic. It's important to me to have a realistic world. Look at the depths that I'm going to make Tolgrind as realistic as I can, within my own willpower and ability. It is my prerogative to make the Iron Horseman the same way. And, even I have gone off on some tangents and come up with some stuff that may not necessarily make sense, or, may be, kind of ridiculous and makes you go, what? That sort of thing. But in a general sense, at least when it comes to actual physics between getting a train from place to place, I will stick to that as much as possible. To the point where I believe I requested the inclusion of a reverse loop because there was no other way to turn the train around. I knew we would be having that service. Sally pulling the gull was one of the earlier things that we came up with, and when we were building Davenport, it was sort of like, well, we do need to turn the train around somehow. The train would need to turn around, so we built a reverse loop in. Actually, I think it might be showcased in one of the episodes with Hank, because he might run around it after being scared, after being spooked by something. It might be in, what is that, episode 3 even, 3 or 4, which is the introductory episode to Hank, if I recall correctly, of the first season, just to specify. In the episode numbering, it's in our internal documentation, it is done by season. So, Priority Mail, for example, is episode 2 of season 2. But for purposes of the intro, the episodes have been numbered sequentially. That wasn't my choice. And that may change in the future, but at this point, probably not, because we're this deep in. And it doesn't really matter either way. It always says the sort of season-based numbering in the description, if I recall correctly. Which I never went through and added descriptions for all the episodes. I feel like I should. That would be a nice thing to sort of devote my time to on the ride to work. But writing the scripts is more important to me. It's getting that content out there. I've talked about this before. If the Iron Horseman were to suddenly, become utterly impossible to produce for whatever reason, I would release the scripts that I have, and the plans and everything else, because nonetheless, I think that the story of the Iron Horseman is one that should be told. Obviously if I didn't think that, I wouldn't be making it. But, I like the story, and I've invested a lot of time and effort into creating said story, so of course I think so. That might be a little bit obvious. But for those of you in the audience, like you, Icer, that like the Iron Horseman just the same, you probably want more too. And the rest of this bit of the comment kind of says so. I'm glad to hear you'll be working on the IHR because I missed seeing a few eps of the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. It'll be kind of cool for be part of the IHR and be on the show too, but I'm not sure if you have any rules regarding on being a part of the IRH. We don't really, and I've talked about this before, I think, on the show. Chris literally bought his way in. He bought his way in with a good idea and $20. Well, a piece of content, really. But it was nonetheless a good idea. He had a character, he had a thought for a character, and we were able to take that thought and mold it into something really spectacular. It's the reason that we have Chris as a character at all. And, if it weren't for that, Season 2 would be extraordinarily different, and the rest of the series would probably be different too. Including everything with Saturdays at Steamtown, because 2124 would be just another engine that happened to end up at Steamtown. And the same thing with all the big stuff that we're planning in Season 3, because it in no small way revolves around both Chris and Cole. Spoilers, a little. I think I've talked about it a little bit before, but it involves something that we may have mentioned, not by name, but may have mentioned, and it has to do with the past of both of those engines, as well as their future. And, introduce some other fun characters, which are one-offs, probably, but it's for the feature, so I'm not too concerned about that. Always the opportunity for those guys to return, though, because of everything that's going on with them. Because of the way that is connected to everything else. And I know I'm building hype here, I don't mean to, because God knows when we're ever going to get to that. But, it's the truth. You guys would at least get to see what we have in store, at least get to see the thoughts that we have, if, for whatever reason, suddenly the Iron Horsemen were to be deemed incompletable or abandoned, officially abandoned, which I'm not going to do anytime soon. I like writing for the Iron Horsemen, I really do. If anything, I'm going to keep writing for the Iron Horsemen, even if video production is always going to be at such a crawl. But yeah, as for being in a part, see, the fact of the matter is, we don't have rules against it, and we do sometimes have a need for voices. If you're subscribed to the Iron Horseman channel, if we are in need of voices, like we can't pull them from, the people we know individually, or pull them from places like the Terminus Fan Chat, we will put out a roll call, sort of a request for people to audition for different voice roles, and then they'll be tossed into a group with all the other voice actors, which largely gets ignored until it's time to record something. Which, that being said, that group has been dormant for an exceptionally long time now, which is unfortunate. But sometimes it comes to life and we talk about Horseman-related things in there. Anyway. But yeah, no, if you are in those groups, or, paying attention to the Iron Horseman channel, which you may be, then you have a much higher chance of being able to have a part in the Iron Horseman. Probably not as, like, a new locomotive, but maybe as a character that shows up a couple of times. A human character, because those are dime a dozen. Humans are worthless anyway. Sorry, what? Who said that? I had this added to the last oh, this is the bamboozlement. I had this added to the last he says, but I'm guessing you didn't see it, so it's okay. Thank you for reposting it if I didn't see it. So, I'm on my route and I came across a meatpacking plant and I figured you could use it on your route too, and it's on the DLS, it's for pig, sheep, and beef. Since you have sheep and olive, you can have a meatpacking plant in the next town or something, and there, in the Quid, and here in the Quid for that meatpacking plant too. And he gives me the Quid, which, surprise, surprise, I already had. I spent all that time downloading it, and I already had it. God damn it, of course. Wasted, 15 minutes of my time getting into the episode here. I'm trying to keep the voice at least entertaining because this is boring. I'm building a mountain. I already built one mountain, now I'm building another mountain. I don't have a choice. If I'm going this way, this is what I gotta do. Pretty much the only other thing I have to do, other than build atoms, which I don't feel like doing right now, honestly, is copy-paste trees. And that's not great. Although the next time I want to do something scenery-wise, we have to fill in that hole and we have to fill in that hole. And then everything up to this line is pretty much done. Except for the stuff by the coast, which that is something that we should do as well. The coast should kind of be priority because it's area that's already quote-unquote done, although it's not. It has all the terrain done, it has everything you're going to be looking at from there, ever, done. And the track work is done, so I should finish the scenery. Okay, what else? Oh yeah, bamboozlement. You can put this packing plant in Gilson City. I might put it in Mason Valley. Also, the SAP Industries are really good, or SAP Industries are really good too, but figure out how to set them up in one thing, and making them work is another. Yeah, I get what you mean. Figuring out how to set them up is one thing, and whoops, why did I just click on that? No, I want to go back to Taint. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Again, but work is another. Yeah, I think I've fiddled with them before. Kind of a pain. I will figure them out if I ever need them. It's the reason I am not going to jump on the meat packing plant, though, I think, is because I use a different sheep commodity. The reason I've been held back with my sheep is the fact that the sheep themselves need to be something I can put in a rail car. And I found, one stock car that I can use with my sheep. Which I hate anyway. The sheep, I mean, not the stock car. Stock car's okay. And it isn't that kind of sheep. It isn't the kind of sheep that go into the place, I think. I will look again when time comes to build Mason's Landing. Mason Valley, not Mason's Landing. But, alas, I'm not sure about that. I don't think that's the case. Alright, and this area, the edge of the map is always awkward to work at, just because you end up with slopes that are way too steep and slopes going off the side of the map, which shouldn't happen, really, necessarily. You should have at least some slopes that go up. But the way that it all works, it just doesn't happen that way. Alright, I'll go and make a new base height over here at some point very soon, before the end of the episode, more than likely. And then he goes, if you ever want to know more about my fiction route, I don't mind chatting over Skype about it either, because you sound like a really cool person to chat with, thank you. And even hang out with too, and talk about trains stuff. Also, you can just call me Isu. That's where he said it at the very end of the comment. I'm going to upvote your comment. And, yeah. I will be happy to chat. Again, you can find me in the Terminus guest list, which you can find by going to the link in any of the Terminus cargoes from last year, probably at least. Or Terminus fan chat. Terminus guest list is for news postings, which you can be in there as well. It's also where you go if you want to be on the podcast. You have to answer a trivia question, which is posted right before we are about to go live, and the first person to answer it gets on, if you don't know the procedure for that. Which is, the question is normally pretty random. It switches. It's always one of the co-hosts or myself that asks the question, or that at least comes up with the question, then I post the question, and then we pick out who the correct answer is said by, which last time it was Pester, after an arduous wait, which, it really does, and we haven't really said this on the show, well, maybe we have, it really does come down to Google Foo sometimes. You've got to get your Google Food on, and because the thing is, we have a question, it's set up so that if you know it, you're gonna get it first. But if you don't know it, if you are the quickest to, and nobody else knows it, if you're the quickest to Google it, you're still gonna get it. It's about having information first, or finding information second. And it's usually pretty useless railroad trivia knowledge. Like, how many diesels does, Age of Steam Roundhouse have in Sugar Creek at this point in time? Are they in Sugar Creek? Whatever, at the Roundhouse. Uh, and that's sort of junk like that. What is the name? What is the railroad on the side of the locomotive that is currently sitting in, Silver Springs or whatever it's called? No, it wasn't Silver Springs. It was another place. I don't remember. People who were there for the disaster of a question last time know. Or mine was... I can't actually think of any one that I've said. There was name 5 mountain passes in the United States. 5 railroad mountain passes. And that was a fun one. One of the ones that I did recently was name all 4 railroads that went into... that terminated in North Boston before North Union Station in Boston was constructed. And that was the B&M, the Fitchburg, the Fitchburg and Lowell, I think, the Boston and Lowell, the Eastern Railroad was one of them, and one other one. I can't remember, because they were pretty obscure. They were pretty obscure, and I wouldn't expect anyone to know them off the top of their head, although some people had some pretty good guesses. And whenever B&M came up with a guess, I was like, well, you got one right. Wait, I think Boston Lowell was one, I think the Fitchburg was another one, B&M, and then the Eastern. That's 4 railroads right there, but I'm not sure if that's correct. I wouldn't have gotten the question. I haven't Googled food fast enough. Quickly enough. Crackly enough. But you can find it. That's the thing. If you don't know it, you're not going to get it right away. You're going to have to take a guess, and the guess is probably going to be wrong, because, like I said, some of those railroads are kind of obscure. But if you Google North Station, Boston, and read the Wikipedia article, you can get all 4 names right there off the Wikipedia article. It's fantastic. And that's why I was like, there is an easy answer to this question. It's prominently featured on a Wikipedia article. And even though the answer itself might be obscure, the location to find it is not. The problem with the question from last episode, although Weibold would argue differently because he's the one that came up with it, and he has a point in some ways, but it was that the answer was obscure, and the location to find it was also a little bit obscure. Let's see where we're at right now, because I can rant about this more. An hour and 32. I'm going to continue working on this. I'm on a roll at this point. The end goal for me, of course, is to obviously get all the way up the canyon. We have all this area to fill in, and we spent all this episode on this and this. But fact of the matter is, that's just what it's going to take. It's going to take a long time to build these mountains. But in the end, they're going to look good. That's the goal. And they're going to be realistic, and we're going to be building track through them, not building them around the track. Which, in my experience, creates a much more organic and realistic orientation of track. And also makes you make legitimate engineering decisions, if you care at all about that. Like, okay, where are we going to put a tunnel? Where are we going to put a grade? Where are we going to do, whatever. Like this, to cross the valley here and then to hug this wall. That's a legitimate engineering decision, as opposed to, going down and crossing and coming back up. Or, to make this curve here to cross here to make it into this tunnel here. I could have gone this way and then around, which I, made an attempt at doing, or I could have gone straight on another high bridge. But that doesn't make as much sense. It makes more sense to dip a little bit lower, build a shorter bridge, and then have a tunnel that may be shorter as well. And then the other question of, okay, where do I end the tunnel? And the question, you wouldn't get any of that if you were just building the track first. You would be saying, okay, let's turn here, and then let's go up a little bit here, and then let's build a bridge here, and then we'll do that. But you're planning all that ahead of time. And not that there's really anything wrong with that, but it leads to a route that is less organically generated than a route that isn't. A route that isn't done that way, a route that's done this way. obviously, there are massive downsides to doing it this way, as you guys are seeing. But I like the results it yields, and the fact that, again, it presents me with engineering problems sort of tickles my brain in a way that you don't get otherwise playing trains. So, there's that. I don't think I can find another excuse to plug the Terminus fan chat or my own Skype anymore. So I'll just leave that be. Maybe I'll talk about it again next episode if somebody says something. But at this point, I'm just going to continue building this mountain and talking about whatever. One of the things, for example, actually, here's a word of the wise, or word of the wise. I've never been sure which one it is. I'm not wise. There's your word of the day. The word is the fact that you're probably, if you're like me, going to accumulate a large number of graphic t-shirts and things of that nature on your ride through school of whatever type, whether that be, middle school into high school into college, or middle school into high school into a trade school, or whatever. Although trade schools, I don't know. Trade schools, they may be a little bit more strict with the dress code. And you may go to a private high school, or you may have a high school with a strict dress code, but most public high schools will totally let you get away with a t-shirt and jeans every day. And there ain't no problem with that. And most colleges, at least state colleges and community colleges and, plenty of other schools will let you get away with that as well. You know why? Because the people that go to those schools, especially if you're going for engineering, are nerds and they don't want to dress up. I know I didn't. And I'm a nerd. So I'm going to generalize and impose myself onto every other human being at my school. Now, the fact of the matter is, plenty of people like to dress up different ways. But if you are like me, and that's the big if, you're going to accumulate a large number of these kinds of clothes. Very casual clothes that are going to become exactly worth nothing to you once you start work in an office environment, if that's the path you choose. And so I am currently grappling with the fact that I've got drawers of clothes that I don't want to get rid of because they are all memories of good times. Like a Durango and Silverton t-shirt or even a Georgetown Whip t-shirt. But, that kind of thing. Maine Narrow Gauge or, Steamtown National Historic Site or Waterfire or, any number of other things. Steve Smith and the Nakeds. You can go into bands. I've got Boston, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. I've got like 3 Dark Side of the Moon t-shirts because people hear you like Pink Floyd and that's all they get you. Just once I'd like a shirt that's just a completely white t-shirt with a brick pattern all the way around. Just completely. No text or anything. That'd be a way to do it. I could probably just design that. That's not hard. Get that printed out. But if it lined up on the seams, then that's good. That's certified satisfying right there. Also, if anybody out west is criticizing my mountains and saying they're too lumpy, go look at some eastern mountains for a little while. They're real lumpy. They're super lumpy. So, eat my shorts. That's another one. TV shows. Although I don't have as many of those, but I do have a bunch of Doctor Who t-shirts. That's kind of the extent of my TV show t-shirts, I think. But anyway, all these graphic tees that I can't wear anymore, that I can't wear to the office, because I'd be the one guy in a t-shirt when everyone else is wearing at least button-downs, if not a suit. I am not going to be the guy wearing a suit to the office every day, especially because I have a bike ride every morning. But I will wear a button-down. It's a nice compromise for me and my sanity. We're gonna have to base height this again. Anyway, just to say, just once more, to thank you for your comment, because I do love responding to those long comments, because I can respond to them in piecemeal, and I can really take some time to talk about each little bit. Now, I could go off on another industrial parks tangent, but I'm not sure how many establishing shots we have of Hanks Industrial Park on the Iron Horseman Railroad. At least that's what we call the place. But you can take some inspiration from there as to how the track arrangement is. And that's the thing with the industrial parks. They're usually very haphazard. And the main line need not run through the center of one. It may run off to one side and have a whole bunch of feeder tracks that lead into the industrial park. But that part is up to you. That part, I think having the feeder tracks is a little bit more easy, and it allows you to take from a whole bunch of other things, because honestly, an industrial park that just sort of grew up alongside a main line is much more common than one that grew up around a main line. And the reason is obvious, because it's a pain to get to the other side of a main line. You know, who's going to voluntarily do that? You look at railroad crossings around things like rail yards and stuff like that, and you'll notice that they're scarce, because who's going to cross the tracks in the middle of a yard? Roads and such are built off of generally paths that people take, and that over time are turned into roads, especially older ones. Newer roads are generally, okay, where do we need capacity? But roads that weren't built with an engineering background, roads that just sort of naturally appeared, are always going to come from the situation of, okay, people are walking here, and then there's enough people walking here that we should pave it. And not too many people are going to cross the middle of a rail yard. They're going to walk down to the end and cross, or they're going to go around altogether. And so, you do have a couple of roads that were at the center of rail yards, but those normally get turned into bridges. And if you look at places like go to Burlington, Vermont, for example, although this isn't so obvious, but there isn't a road that crosses the center of the rail yard, I don't think. There's one that crosses at the very north end. Another example, perhaps, is Valley Falls. There's not Valley Falls, Rhode Island, to specify. There is not a road that crosses the middle, but there's one that crosses right after the yard terminates. What a surprise that this is the case, because people don't want to cross the middle of a rail yard. Or, more importantly, people straight up can't, because there are train cars parked in the way. Areas where the roads and the rail yards grew up sort of in synchronicity are ones where you have a road that is bisecting a rail yard, or ones where the municipality does not have the money to raise or lower the road to avoid it. For example, Palmer, Massachusetts, across the New England Central and Mass Central rail yard that they share, I believe, which is just to the south of the Diamond, there's a road that cuts across the middle of it. Why? Because that's the only way to get across. Going down to the north end, going up to the north end, there's a diamond there, and a station, and it's, it doesn't really lead to anything either, and there's a river, I believe, as well in the way. And going down to the south end, there's, I think, possibly that same river in the way, because the railroad ends, the yard ends, railroad, the yard ends, and immediately becomes a bridge. It immediately goes over a river. So, it is, those kind of roads are going to appear less. Now, where did I start this tangent? Oh yeah, industrial park will grow up on one side of a railroad, because it will be tough to get people, materials, trucks to the other side of that main line. People will avoid that at all costs. It's not like there's a yard there, but industrial parks do often grow up alongside yards as well, and the reason is multifaceted. One is because yards tend to grow out of areas where there is demand for car switching. Two is that both yards and industrial and people centers and commercial centers tend to grow out of areas where there is an intersection of things, be that rivers, river and railroad, or multiple railroads, or even multiple roads, or road and railroad. Whatever, an intersection of things will grow into a town, eventually, in some way. If there is a boom time, you will see a lot more of that happening. Whatever railroad that the New England Central Railroad was originally, whatever, if it was originally called New England Central when it was created, or Mass Central, whatever that railroad was when it crossed the Boston and Albany, or whatever that railroad was at the time, I am doubtful that Palmer was a very large town at all. In fact, I have my doubts that there was much going on there. in the first place, but the fact that they had to build a diamond there means that you start attracting people because you have a lot of trains going through this one area. And so people see not only employment opportunities, but they see opportunities to service those employees, and they see an opportunity to, sort of capitalize on the fact that there's a lot of traffic moving through here. And then this is where the industrial parks come in. They see the opportunity to make use of the fact that there are now trains stopping in that area. So you can have an industry start to grow, which can encourage the railroad to come there in greater force, which will then in turn encourage more industry and more commercialism and more people. Or you could have, railroad just meandering through empty territory that, is given sort of the spark of life for whatever reason. Be that because of an intersection of railroads or what have you, perhaps the finding of a resource, and boom, suddenly you've got this town that's growing up very rapidly, and now you have an industry being born, but you have a rail yard that's growing up alongside it to service that industry, for the simple sake of storing rail cars for that industry. But it is normally a junction that spurs a rail yard, and it's normally depends how old the industry is. It's normally a that was a mistake. We're gonna have to roll with it. Normally a source of power or an intersection of things that spurs industry. Now, the industry in this case, intersection of things, intersection of people moving corridors, that would be like the post road and something else. Post road literally being the road on which the post travels, the mail. It took me until I was much too old, probably, to understand why there are so many post roads in the U.S. I was thinking, well, posts aren't that special. But then, my girlfriend's father is a mailman, so yeah, sort of helped that thought along. But post office, no, I never made that connection. Post office, post road, whatever. I'm stupid. It's okay though. If you're just realizing this, it's okay. In fact, some places might not have post roads. Some more modern places, some places that developed more recently than New England, may not have a prominent post road because the post would be delivered by rail. So, the post road dates back not to mailmen on Grumman long life vehicles, which are your mail trucks. If you think of a U.S. mail truck, you're probably thinking of a Grumman LLV. But a, oh crap, have I done it again? I don't like it. I'm gonna have to lower this side. This way. But it was based off of folks with horses in stagecoaches delivering the post. By the point in time where automobiles became so prevalent that we were delivering mail by mail truck, I believe that post as a term for the mail in the U.S. had fallen out of favor in terms of just mail, or in favor of just mail. M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E. But yeah, if it was M-A-L-E, mailman would be kind of redundant now, wouldn't it? Anyway, that said, yeah, you have an intersection of people. You have a bunch of reasons, but to go back to the Macaulay book that I mentioned earlier, mill, the earliest mills existed on the locations they existed because of one reason, and that reason was a drop in the level of a river. So a waterfall or rapids or something of that type, something of that kind and description would spur industry. And then, because that would be in the 1700s or so, late 1700s, I guess, if you're in the US, or even back to the 1600s if you're in England, because their industrial revolution started much earlier than ours. Partly because the schematics for the machines that would become so prominent in especially the textile field of the Industrial Revolution were kept in England and patented there and not allowed to leave and go to the US, mostly because they didn't really want our manufacturing to compete with theirs. Surprising, nobody. You know, it's typical, it's expected, and it's not a bad idea. But eventually a guy by the name of Samuel Slater managed to smuggle some plans for a loom, I believe it was, out of England and into Rhode Island, and there he built in Pawtucket Slater's Mill. And that was the first textile mill in the United States, I believe, and it was the thing that really kick-started the American Revolution, because suddenly we realized that we could do this too. Okay, I've made 2 mountains. Oh, I made a big nice bowl in one of them. Smoke weed every day. There we go. Alright, well, last thing I should do then, other than look at the river to make sure that I didn't accidentally make it go downhill again, would be to extend the railroad a little bit, at least a little bit farther. And now, the thing I did before I filled that in was I actually pushed the railroad into the cliff a little bit more, because I felt like it was hanging out too much. It was all more like this, and not more like this. But this is okay, because that's the prelude to a bridge. But as I have done before, I'm going to go with 0.01, because that's pretty much the lowest gradient you'll be able to get away with. Okay. So this is more difficult than I thought, at least slightly more so. Let's see. The other thing is with such a low gradient, when you move things around like this, it doesn't really ruffle the feathers of Tane, and it doesn't really mess with the gradients that much. And I think I'm gonna just go straight through this in a cut. Which, you know, sort of makes sense to me to do. Just to... You know, we can spend a little bit of extra money on this section. It's okay, guys. We have some dough left over from whatever. Oh yeah, and that's not a deep cut at all. So I like what we're doing here so far. Let's see now, though. I think it's time to go uphill, actually. So let's undo what we've done so far. And from here, I think we're going to start going uphill, maybe at 0.5%. 0.5. We get away with like a reverse curve, although the fact of the matter is I probably shouldn't do those because they're going to act weird with the splines. You can get away with reverse curve, but you need a small straight section in the middle. Straighten that out. Let's see how this looks. That looks no different. I think we're not going to change that. So we're going to leave that as is. But from here is where we need to start fiddling with stuff. Yeah, it looks fine. We have a decent sized cut over here, but that's not the end of the world. Honestly, we could probably make this straight. The railroad would not put that turn in there. That unnecessary turn. Oh, so it means I'm going to change that. I lied, I guess. Boink, boink. No, we don't want this weird S-curve thing that we got going on. Yeah, we can get away with that. And that's what the engineers would be saying, too. They'd be saying, well, you know, it's easier to make straight lines, and railroads like straight lines. And if we can make a straight line here, then that's going to be fantastic. And they would draw a straight line on the map, they would look at the topography lines. You know, in this day and age, they'd do some calculations to see how much they'd have to cut and how much they'd have to fill after doing some surveying. And they would say, we can get away with that. Because the fact of the matter is, engineering, as much as it is going by the book and doing numbers and calculating and this, that, and the other, and playing with your slide rule all day, there is a point in engineering where you have to know when to wing it. And that's, you know, the books are there, but they are the guides. They are the what does it say in the MUTCD? Also, I'm going to widen this turn a little bit. I mean, the MUTCD is a Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which makes it sound pretty official. But the fact of the matter is, it is a book of suggestions. It is a book of things that you probably should do to make sure that everybody knows what the hell's going on when they approach your intersection. And, you know, and that's true, and that's why it differs from state to state, because not every place needs to follow the same rules because of a variety of reasons. But anyway, we've got slightly more done. We're just sort of wobbling up the hill now. So this is okay because we have that one. This one would have not been okay. So we dodged that bullet. And now I just need to not go into this tile, which should be easy because it's on this side of the river. I don't think I'm going to be compelled to cross the river again for a while. Or at all. I think at all. Let's see what height we're at now. So we're at 80. And like I've said before, we need to get to 87. We have this entire canyon to climb and then descend over here. So there's going to be another false summit over here somewhere, probably. Right after we get out of the canyon. This, though, I should be changing out these wooden bridges because I don't like the way they look. And they would have a weight limit that's lower than kind of what I want to deal with. Like we talked about in the more recent Zombie Train, which was not a review. Okay, now what? Well, let's see. What is our base height now? It is this. Yeah. It's really this. And I've only got a couple of minutes left, but I think what I'm going to do is this. Just sort of put that down to say, hey, this is our new base height. You know, future me, when you come back next week to work on this, you gotta build to this height. This is your goal. Everything's gonna be built on this, nothing's gonna be lower than it. That's the first part. And you've got to start going up from here, too. The other thing I might have is a summit lake. Which won't be called Summit because we already have a place that's going to be called Summit, unless we want to rename Summit something else. And also, this isn't... it won't be the Summit. So maybe we shouldn't name it Summit anything. But it is a false summit. So we will have to call it something, probably. But up here, it might be prudent to build a little lake. You know, engines would probably stop here because it's the end of a climb to take on water or something like that. You know, I don't know how far you can really make it, necessarily, without filling up on water, but that seems to be about it, you know? So, you know, here we would put a water tank, water tower, and also, we're gonna be needing, let's see, so, we had a few miles. Jefferson Cut is there, that's the beginning of one passing siding. Double track ends there. So, looking at this, double track ends here. So it's about that far to that. So that means the next siding has to be about that far away. Which means that we should already be in next siding territory. which I could build a small siding here, but I wouldn't want to be building a siding out onto this cliff side, because then you'd have to widen this cut. And all these embankments, that's another one. You know, I could build one here because that wouldn't be too much engineering work. I just sort of nudge this over and everything. But fact of the matter is, I should be building one over here, because this area is relatively flat, it's relatively empty. So this area, we had one there, we had one there, we have one here, and then we'll have one up at the top, which would be over here. Which I'm going to mark this with a red circle. There we go. That's probably going to be the site of the highest point and also the site of Summit Lake, or whatever we're going to call it. I've been naming things after presidents, so maybe Washington Lake. Not purposefully naming things after presidents, but it's kind of been what happens. Alright, well, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment below anything you like, and I will read it on air, more than likely. If it's something that's, you know, that you're saying just so that I read it on air, that's different. But feel free to comment what you like below, and I will talk about it next time. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. Trainman out.